What if there were financial solutions being created by brave What if there were financial solutions being created by brave and brilliant women, a feminist economic model? A new organization of women is realizing that woman-centered model, lifting up women activists and their real-world solutions for building an economy of our own.
90 years ago, in a famous essay, Virginia Woolf advised a young woman writer that she needed two things, an income and a room of her own. After decades of a pay gap and big money's corruption, we need more than that today. We're creating an economy of our own.
An economy of our own is creating awareness of how rigged the current economy is and how many inspiring solutions are rising because of the work of brilliant women activists.
Women have been cheated and exploited by a mean economy for so long. But that's why we're in the best position to fix it together. And we're starting right now.
The people who have been most excluded by that system are the ones that have the deepest understanding of what has to be transformed. It is from that knowledge that it's very important for them to lead. That is leadership we absolutely have to have.
Screwnomics is my word for the widely applied economic theory, I guess, that women should always work for less, or even better, for free. Together, we can create a living economic ecology. But to do that, we're going to need to make economics far more sexy than it is today. There are feminist economic solutions, real world fixes that are working in communities right now, communities like yours.
An economy of our own is all about creating the space to lift up solutions women are advancing. We're here to celebrate women's way of knowing about money, bring you the work they're doing to shake up the system, and compile critical resources for activists like you who want to bring these kinds of changes into your own communities. Put your head together with us. It's the way we create real solutions, talking together about building an economy that works for all of us. We want an economy of our own. We want it now. And if you do too, join us today at aneconomyofourOwn.org. What if there were financial solutions being created by brave and brilliant women, a feminist economic model? A new organization of women is realizing that woman.
Sorry about that. Hi. Somebody started the recording. That's great. I'm Ellen Thomas, and I want to welcome you to An Economy of Our Own event tonight. And I want to tell you how you can use the features of the webinar. If you look down at the bottom of the screen, it says Q&A. If you click on that, there's a box where you can write your questions. And if you will, you can raise your hand when you get ready to ask questions of the panelists. And if you would put your location in the chat, we would appreciate it. And I'm going to turn this over to Rickey now.
Hello, I'm so glad our community well-being and mutual aid, not something that you hear about a lot, but we've got a wonderful panel here that knows about, and we're going to have a great conversation. But first of all, we'd like to make sure we're all at an economy of our own, and our.
Rickey, we can't hear you. Maybe you should turn off your video.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So if you would share the first slide, Ellen. Oh, that's not very clear. I can read it. There we go. Our assumptions are these: money talks in a male voice. Our financial systems, rules, and tools were not invented by women, and generally they omit, misname, and discount females. Slavery ended 157 years ago now, but systemic racial exploitation remains almost as ancient as sexism, because women have always worked, but only the past 50 years have the majority of women and young mothers entered the modern job market for pay. Women and people of color are now business owners and financial managers, yet their caring remains discounted. All of our caring remains discounted. Economics, from the Greek word oikonomia, literally means household management, and we believe women's know-how can change an enemy waged as war now to one that is waging life. And growing equality and environmental ruin tells us we can't afford more alpha male only business as usual. We've got to get going. We don't have a line left. And then we talk about our intentions. Next slide, Ellen. Can you hear me, Ellen? Next slide, please.
It's already been changed.
Oh, to grow, our intention is to grow your economic confidence and your life waging value. We trust each woman's identity is shaped and strengthened by discovery of her own economic truth. And we want to honor all stages in women's ways of knowing, a wonderful book by Belinkie et al. We start out often in silence. We're quiet and not seen and not heard, feeling dumb and disconnected. And then we move on to receive knowledge. We begin to listen to voices of others in authority. And tonight we're very lucky. We have some very authoritative voices to listen to. We move on then to subjective knowledge. We listen to our own inner voice and we protect it. We're still a little fearful. But then comes procedural knowledge, where we become interested not only in what people think, but how their perspectives were formed. We ask questions and we find some truths more reliable and logical than others. Constructed knowledge is when we trust our ability to pursue knowledge by to with passion. Ellen and Mary Beth are going to help us with Q&A. We also want to thank you for joining us tonight on Martin Luther King Day, the evening of. It's an important day for us, and I remember that Martin was very, as I remember, and I think he'd be out. You know, we're continue. Oh, we know no one is coming to save us, so how do we support each other in these times? If we are the economy, and we are, how can we help ourselves and our communities? I want to introduce myself. You saw me in that early video. I'm the author of Screwnomics and the founder of this Feminist Alliance. But I'm going to ask our panelists to tell us the story of how they came to this economic work. What influenced them? What made them decide this was the path for them, with passion and power? So the feminist saying is that that politics is personal, and we think economics is personal too. So I'd love to invite Shenaz Hossein. We're so lucky to have you here with us from the University of Toronto. Will you tell us the story of you come to this work, and what made it such an important passion for you?
You're on mute, Caroline.
Of course. Hi, welcome, and blessings to everyone from Toronto, Canada. I want to say that it's a real honor for me to be here sharing the stage with so many fabulous feminists. So whoopee, thanks for having me. Thanks, Rickey, for inviting me to share. I just want to say that I'm staying on Indigenous territory. This is stolen lands, unceded, and I give thanks and praise to the Indigenous people here in Canada for letting me live, work, and play. So I'm, as Rickey said, I'm an associate professor at global development at the University of Toronto. But most days, what makes me most happy as a feminist is collaborating with the women that I work with in the DiSE collective. And I'll stick a link up at some point. It's called the Diverse Solidarity Economies Collective, where it's a bunch of scholars who are really thinking about how we redo, shame this mainstream marketplace so that it's much more inclusive, particularly of people of color. But I just want people on the call, if you're not academics, to know that this is my second life. I actually worked in community development for 16 years internationally, providing financial services to people overseas in Africa, usually those who are largely excluded from conventional banking systems. Some of you know it as microfinance. And because we have so many feminists here, I'm going to shamelessly invite you to join the International Association for Feminist Economics. We're having our annual meeting in Geneva. It's going to be both hybrid and, in person. Please check out IAFE, that's the acronym, and join us. I'll flip up a link for IAFE at some point because I think it's an amazing, amazing space for feminists to talk about economics. So Rickey asked, economics is very personal to me. It's why I've committed and devoted my life's work in research towards rethinking economic systems. I grew up, my lived experiences growing up with precarity, and that deeply impacted me. I'm first generation or second generation Canadian. My parents emigrated from the Caribbean via New York City and finally settled in Toronto, Canada. When I was quite young, around 12 or 13, my father was made redundant from his job. He was the breadwinner of our family. He plummeted into severe depression. It was very costly. In so many ways. There was something traumatic that happened after losing his job that really spiraled my family into this kind of precarity. And that stays with you when you're young and you're going through moving from place to place and what have you. And I don't think my family ever fully recovered from that harm caused by commercial banks, I'd say. And that kind of family secret, that shame that you carry, is really what actually motivates me to really think about how do we do things more equitably? How do we make sure people have the financial goods they need so that they can live and be and feel like they can contribute to society? I knew that we could do better because I bear witness, and I think that we relied so much on what was called the solidarity economy. And so for many alienated people, people who are going through trauma and struggling to fit into market or mainstream systems, it's these alternatives that help people recover from the pain. And so right now, I'm working on informal cooperative banks. I'm trying to work with that segment within the solidarity economy that's often very detached from any kind of formality. I think on purpose, but also sometimes out of oppression and exclusion. And currently I'm looking, and I'll speak about it in a minute, Rickey and folks, about what these systems are. They're rotating savings and credit associations, but they're really a way that women are really stepping up and taking charge of financial systems on their own terms. But yeah, my story of why I do what I do in economics is deeply personal. It's something that stays with me, that, commercialize, individualize, market systems can have a severe and traumatizing impact. And that's why I'm the feminist I am today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Katonya, you're here from West Virginia. And
That's right.
Yeah, tell us about how you have come to your work. And I don't know whether you want to tell about oh yes, this is a picture of the West Virginia State House with the Kwanzaa display, a celebration of family, community, and culture, which you had a great deal to say. Tell us about that. I was pleased to be down in West Virginia on one of those days, and we had a great time.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about being able to put up that display in our Capitol. It's the first time that Kwanzaa was celebrated at our state Capitol, and I had my boyfriend actually painted that picture. And in being resourceful and telling the secrets, that is a very large sheet that he painted it on, and then the PVC pipe, and it's just beautiful. And it was beautiful in the marble space. Again, my name is Katonya Hart, and I'm in Charleston, West Virginia. I'm from New Jersey. That's where my journey started. And in my younger years, going to school as a girl, one thing a counselor said to me was, don't worry about it. Whenever I'd ask him a question, he says, you'll drop out of school when you turn 16. You know, you'll probably have a family, you'll have a baby, everything will be all right. You can go on, public services, and that's pretty much what girls like you do. And I'm like, I don't even know what a girl like me is, kind of attitude. And so when I continued to push the idea that I wanted to go to college, he said, well, let's take an aptitude test. And anybody from West Virginia that knows me probably has heard this story, that it came back that I was going to be a domestic engineer. My uncle was an electric engineer, and I've heard of other engineers, and oh my God, I'm gonna be an engineer. Like, what kind of engineer is that? And so he was like, you go around, you kind of pick up things behind people, and you help them organize things, and you pick up stuff here, and you tidy things. I said, that sounds like a maid. And so he was like, yeah, it could be called a maid as well, kind of thing. And so I was like, for all my time in school and for all my efforts, the best you're going to offer me is just, now don't get it twisted. I had a friend who was a maid, and she was a wizard mixing those chemicals and getting things up. I mean, she had a special passion that was not me, that still is not me. So I needed something else. That's not where my success lied. Praying to God for what did I need to do. And the other thing that came up was, well, you know what the oldest profession in the world is? What are you talking about? Well, sometimes young ladies from, poorer backgrounds and, a little promiscuous and, no, I don't know. I come from a Christian household where that is just unacceptable, being raised by my grandparents, doing all they can, going to work every day. And us sharing amongst each other to make sure that we always had sharing in the community, to make sure that everyone in our community always had, reaching down from New Jersey to Florida to making sure that the family had. Why would I settle for less than what I saw? Why did these people believe my grandparents who raised me deserve less? How is it she could buy a refrigerator and pay on it for almost 7 years before paying it off? And she cut those credit cards up. It wasn't a great deal, and wanted to understand better. But let me tell you, my grandma, who couldn't read, she could cipher. Let me tell you, she could cipher, and getting that all taken care of, being able to buy our house, only to find out after they passed away, and the person who made the bargain with them, the children of this person, tell us that the house actually wasn't purchased. Not understanding the paperwork, making payments on a house to own the house, to have equity, to have a place for me and my brothers and sisters to go, only to find out that this man had hoodwinked my grandmother and my grandfather. to have a mother who didn't finish but nothing but the 8th grade and still not understanding the paperwork to know how to file based on the fact that we had squatters' rights that we didn't know about. How do we squirrel away and fight against a language, a system that just did not include us as we tried to fight forward, tried to create that generational wealth? And I watched them struggle over and over again. And I saw the bleak future that they had for me. And I said, it is not for me. And I will not just go down. I will not simply accept a job that I'm not happy with for my everyday life. And once I started unraveling the messages, women wrapping themselves around me, showing me, giving me the opportunity and saying, I will open the door, but you will have to step through. I will show you how, but you have to be willing to learn. And in those spaces, learning how to create equity, learning how to sit down, calm my mind, and read every line on a document, on an instructional manual. Coming to West Virginia through Job Corps and having that system decide, we're going to learn how you learn and teach you in that manner so that you can receive the information. If you need to stay longer in a space, it's not a span of semesters or days. We want to make sure you have that information, and me being willing to accept their guidelines and going through. That's how I own my house. That's how I have a car now. And so the next thing to do is, as people turned around and helped me, it is my job to turn around and help other people. It is my job to understand this thing further. And I came across Kwanzaa and the 7 principles. And it put it in a capsule, all these thoughts and feelings, all the things that were successful in my life that I could turn around and celebrate, not only at the one point of the year, but as a way to accept in my life that also went along with my Christian beliefs. And I don't think you have to be a Christian. I just happen to be. And I have the respect and the beauty of being able to study other religions to know that there are aspects to pull in to enhance me, to enhance others, to create a space of unity, of equity, and of understanding of how that person understands. Please let me tell you, it is not a gift to me because you want me to have it. It is a gift to me when it's something that I want. And this is something that I want for myself and for my community. And I surround myself with other people seeking that path forward. And we continue to grab people in and bring them in and bring them in. What do you need? Not what I say you need. What do you need for your success? What does that look like to you? And let's work together to get you there. I am opening doors and holding them open. And if I can't hold them open by myself, I have my sisters on one side of me, my sisters on the other side. Being a part of the National Organization for Women, what an exciting situation, the national seat. Again, a little poor girl in New Jersey, and it is the Garden State. I don't care who tries to argue with me. It is the Garden State. Growing up with corn and hay and rivers on both sides, to now sit on the national seat of the National Organization for Women, representing the Eastern region, where I had the fortunate opportunity of meeting Rickey Diamond and her further giving me language and telling me it is okay. Everything that education system said was wrong. Me creating the words that didn't exist, to create the definition that I needed to move forward that didn't exist. Rickey Diamond comes right out of the gate with an economy of her own, talking about screwnomics. I'm like, what? Yes, it is okay to own the space, not only say who I am, but give it words and legs to walk. And so I'm so happy to be in this space. I'm so happy to know that Crystal Good is on here with our Black by God. And she took me up on a call and I said, don't leave me behind. And she's like, oh no, I cannot leave you behind, and made me one of her editors of her new magazine. It's a newspaper right now. It's digital, and we're moving towards that magazine. I'm calling what it's gonna be, a magazine, and she's working hard and allowing me to share the space with her. And there are others on. I saw Amy Jo pop up on here. We've got delegate Danielle Walker, She is doing the thing in West Virginia. Let me tell you, she is rising to the top and not letting them stop her. And we sit down and have one-on-one meals together. And so I'm just so pleased with the women God has placed in my life. And I'm extremely happy to be here with these other ladies. As I read their bios, I was like, what? I said, these are my new best friends. And I just can't wait to find out more about each and every one of you on this call and into the future. Please do not leave me behind, because I'm not going to leave those who are behind me behind. So as you lift me up, I'm lifting them up, and let's keep it moving forward. Let's create that economy of our own.
Whoa, yeah, yes to everything. Oh, thank you so much. Crystal, tell us about your passion. And yeah, that's kind of a, yeah,
Yes.
what can you tell us?
Yes. Hi, welcome everyone. Honored to be here and really inspired by what both of you ladies just shared. The truth is, we are wealthy beyond measure. And our communities are just brimming with possibilities and generous people who really want to make meaningful contributions. So I really became fascinated by the power of money in my early 20s, when in 2004, I happened to get a job as executive assistant at a bank in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a very wealthy area. And the president of the bank had just found out that he had been embezzling millions of dollars over the last decade. And so I was like copying the evidence and just was like, whoa, what is enough? Like, what is it that would drive an already multimillionaire man to do this kind of fraud? And so went back to school, got my degree, and what I want to tell you about today is something beautiful and tragic that happened in my community September 8th of 2020. It was the end of a long, hot summer of drought here in Southern Oregon. A very windy day we woke up to, and we had a huge firestorm rage through our valley and destroy over 2,000 homes, many of them trailer parks with seniors and Latino workers. And we were left without power for 10 days and horrible air quality. It was just really a devastating and scary experience. And what was beautiful that emerged from that was all these mutual aid centers right in the downtown parking lots, and they were there for months offering free clothes, basic necessities, food for free. And at every one of those mutual aid centers, there was a board that showed what was being offered that day, what was available for people, and then what was needed. And so people would show up who were willing and able to contribute, look at what was needed. Pictures were shared on social media. It was the most heartwarming and beautiful thing to see neighbors turning towards neighbors, especially after what we've all suffered with such social isolation in this time of the pandemic. It was absolutely heartwarming. And this really affirms work that I've been doing for the past 5 years with the Post-Growth Institute. And you can show this slide here, Ellen, about the offers and needs market. And it's an ancient process, and especially women are drawn to this, where we come into the marketplace and claim it in a sacred way. And it's really most simply a 2-hour facilitated process where community members, as you can see there, it happens virtually or in person, and people get to reflect on and exchange their passion, knowledge, skills, resources, and opportunities, and go through this process of reflecting, sharing, and connecting with each other. You can take that slide down. So it's absolutely amazing what I've seen running, these, and they're happening all over the world now. People gain employment, find places to live, initiate friendships. And more importantly, it's really a process that through our surveys, we've seen it boost people's self-esteem, positivity, ability to really trust other people. And so this process really decolonizes the marketplace, because people come to the tables as equals. I've seen very wealthy millionaire people sit at the table with homeless mothers, and it's not about charity, it's about mutual aid and creating spaces where people can bring their wholeness with both their offers and their needs. So now it's being used all around the world. We've been training facilitators of this. You know, some examples are in public housing community, an artist collective, an electricians collective in Chicago, African immigrants in Italy, and a farming community in Alabama. And what's beautiful is it does tap into this generosity and desire to support one another. And that to me is at the heart of the economy, is a place where we come together to care for one another. So it's a very exciting time in this movement that we're creating to create greater solidarity in our communities. And if anyone's interested in finding out more, just drop your email in the chat. You can either send it to me as a private message by just dropping down to my personal name there, or just paste it in the chat. And I can send you this PDF with the 2 pages of steps to run your own virtual OA&M. It's super easy to start just casually, even with friends, family, colleague. And we also have a facilitator training starting March 1st. So please do reach out if you'd like more information. And I'm going to end here just saying, it is more important now than ever before to turn towards one another and to really engage in the sacred reciprocity with life. And women, we know how to do this in our bones. Thank you.
Rickey?
Introduce 3 other images that will quickly show the context of this conversation, of all the things that get left out of our thinking. This first picture of Hazel Henderson's layer cake with icing explained so much to me. You'll see that the top layer is the private sector. It's frosting on the very top, but underneath that is the public sector that makes it possible, that paves roads, that provides protection. And then there's the underground economy that is also monetized. You see the half of the cake is monetized. And the bottom 2 layers, the love economy and Mother Nature, are not monetized, which means that they're not counted as part of, on this graph it says GNP for gross national product, which is now the gross domestic product for reasons we don't need to go into right now. But the GDP only counts the dollars that are exchanged. So she points out that the private sector couldn't exist without that public sector it rests on. And neither one of those could exist without the social cooperation that rests on. And then underneath it all, of course, is nature's layer that makes everything possible. That made sense to me. Next slide, please. In Screwnomics, I talk about the 2 elements, the for-profits and the business, the frosting on the cake. The nonprofit, which nonprofits began to exist around the turn of the 19th century, but they didn't become tax exempt until the 1950s, which surprised me. But we don't have a name for workplaces that are excluded from economic thinking because there were these old-fashioned ideas about a masculine world of money and business and where economics happened. And then there was this other feminine realm of the home and children and the angel of the house who took care of everything. And she, of course, was working, but she was a dependent. She was supported, supposedly. wasn't true for a great many women, but nevertheless, that was the ideology. And so I call it the great unprofit, which is our homes, where we're discouraged from as production centers for healthy human beings, which is what they are, and we're encouraged instead to function as consumers and as debtors. Next image, please. This is new. Caroline introduced me to this book, Take Back the Economy, an ethical guide for transforming our communities. And this is another metaphor that is basically showing you the same thing. You see the iceberg above water there is wage labor, commodity markets, capitalist enterprise, the for-profit stuff that is on top. And underneath are all the activities of nature and of love and social cooperation that makes all of that possible. Without that, all that activity down below, which includes soil nutrition and compost, it includes our metabolism, it includes breastfeeding, it includes our imaginations, our respiration, all of the things that we're doing to support that of iceberg up above. So all of this giant image here, where you could fill in more function you think of, are really upholding all of that money making stuff. Okay, so that gives you three images to think of, as to think about all that gets left out now. So with that, I want to just I want to begin the conversation with a question. I wonder what you all think about Americans, and do they tend to think about mutuality and helping each other as part of the economy? Are we encouraged to think about it that way?
It is a competition to see who can get,
whoever would like to begin the conversation.
Yeah, it is. It seems to be supposedly a race to see how much you can hoard and keep from other people. And you know, it's ridiculous that you get measured not by who you touch and who you help and who you give a hand up and who you help get beyond the point you made, but how much you have in the bank, how much resources. All the language speaks to is measuring that those kind of items. Let me just call them items instead of the value of people. That's the real power. That's where we really need to focus. That's how we will all be able to lift each other up, but that's not what's considered.
So why do you think that is? Why? What discourages people from thinking about mutuality and cooperation as part of the economy? What's in the way?
I think, Rickey, if I can come in, I teach a course on the social and solidarity economy. And often when you first ask students, like just academic wise, text wise, school wise, they often come to you and equate the economy with just the corporate sector, right? Firms that make profit, and usually looks something like a commercial titan of sorts. But as you push and probe more, you start to understand, and then you start to ask them, well, what are the things you do on the weekend? What happens when you get sick? Where are you going? And then when you start to ask them these other things, these other layers of institutions that interact with their lives, you start to pull out like, well, the state is a part of the economy, the public sector, right? But then you also get to this idea of the third sector, right? The solidarity economy, this kind of economy that kind of is like an iceberg, right? Of these different ways in which people participate in the economy. And I think that it's not so far-fetched to understand why people equate the economy, at least in this part of the world, not everywhere, in this part of the world, with corporations. And it's because that's the bias that's inherent in society. But I do think COVID has created an opening, and others can speak to this. But I do think that there is a reckoning now, and people are seeing that there are three major parts to our economy, and that the third sector is not dormant. It's actually the one that has been helping us, especially in the Western part of the world, when formal entities had to shut down because of this pandemic, and that ordinary people were figuring out how to assist one another. So I think I'm optimistic that we're changing that narrative, that people are now starting to question why the economy values some kinds of labor and not others.
Mm.
Well, I would like to share here in the chat.
So,
one thing that was said was fear. And fear not to have a lack of, to lack abundance, being part of that. And that was from Chris, and I may have gotten it slightly sliced up, but my co-chair of the West Virginia Women's Commission Economic Empowerment Committee, she says something that rang true to me, and that is African Americans are not taught about money and finance, that it's simply left out of, as so many things, for us to have an understanding and operate in those places. And I believe Michelle Barnes-Russell is correct. Again, this is why she's my co-chair here in West Virginia, trying to empower women in finance, because she really has a deep insight, and I believe that's true as well. It's something that I didn't learn until I had the space to learn when I went to Job Corps.
Yes, I agree there with what you put in the chat there, Caroline. Yes, I think that it's very important to define those two. And for me, it's part of the big healing that can happen now as we turn towards one another and regain a sense of belonging. Deep down, we want that, and we felt so isolated and like a faceless consumer with, or a disposable worker. And so I feel like it really is a large part of this movement that's emerging around mutual aid, solidarity, especially during the pandemic, out of necessity, right? We realize that we really do need each other, and there's a certain deep satisfaction that comes, and a feeling of belonging when we can trust our neighbors and not just feel like a disposable part of the economy.
And Rickey, do you remember when you had that slide that talked about racial exploitation? It was one of the things that have been with us for a long, long time, and it just never seems to go away. Well, in 2020, right? Like, do you remember? So 2020 and all those protests that happened really kind of, because it converged with this crazy pandemic, that, what we're seeing is that people of color, particularly people of African descent, have always had mutual aid in their lives, right? Like, this is how we operate on crisis mode. And so sometimes I think it took a pandemic for mainstream society, those with power, to start to realize that mutual aid has been always a part of Black women's lives, particularly if they're living on the margins. You kind of figure out how to cooperate and share goods with one another. And, that's a practice that's happening everywhere. To think it's not is a little delusional, right? Like, so who gets to define what's an economy? I mean, that's really kind of the showdown, right? Like, who gets to define that the economy is equated with corporations really is uninformed.
that is the question. Who gets to define? So far, it's been a very small elite group of mostly very privileged white men who have this small club, and they have their annual beauty contest at Forbes magazine to see who's the biggest, right? Who's got the most? Yeah. Yeah. So,
and Rickey, also I want to push back a little bit, because I do think elites in other countries, there is a global sort of elitism that is happening around the world. So even, we can say that it's the Occidental or the Western world that is conspiring to make global capital look a certain way. But there's collusion with local elites in other countries that are in the South that are conspiring with these kinds of notions too, right? The whole free market trickle down with Milton Friedman was an experiment that was conducted on Chilean soil by Chilean local elites who studied in US schools and then thought that they would, collaborate with a dictator, in Chile to experiment on this privatization idea, right? I like to think that this idea of global power and exclusion and the ways in which the markets are running is not only that of the Western world. There's been a lot of protest in the Western world from underrepresented groups like, people of color, immigrants, Black women generally, lower income, who have been fed up of this system. So there's protests. We don't actually amplify enough of the protests that happen in the West, which I think we should, and we tend to over-exaggerate that all of the global South is like anti, corporations, but there is this elite collusion that's happening. Anyways, I just thought that we should say that.
Yeah, sure. Let's move on. We all know about this, but let's move on to some inspiring examples of women that are making a difference with revolving loan funds or mutual aid that you know about. Can you tell us some stories about examples you've seen that you think we should know about that doesn't get enough attention?
I can go ahead and I'll put some in the chat as well here, a list of people, not exclusively women, some of them, but really some innovative models of basically greater transparency, decentralized decision-making, ways that we can empower people to claim their value, to have greater understanding of the basics of finance and be able to engage in meaningful ways with their communities. And several of these, including the Womanist Working Collective on the East Coast of the US and Cola Nut Collaborative in Chicago, both use time banking. So this is an egalitarian system where people have an account and basically it's hour for hour. There isn't the hierarchical value discrimination that happens. So I think time banking is a very important movement to watch, especially in times of economic downturn or turbulence, that really this could empower us to have more decentralized culture in our communities.
For me, I'd like to say that again, Crystal Good.
See, you've got.
I'm sorry. I'm working with Crystal Good, and we've created a spot to ask for donations to start working on education, scholarships, and outside of just college. Again, I did not find my success with college. It was a vocational school that brought me there, but creating that space and that fun, if you will, allow me to use that mutual aid to get people where they need to be rooted in their purpose and what they've been called to do. We so much are following a pattern of a culture and group of people outside of ourselves. We allow ourselves to become extractive, looking at a model that's not meant for us and being convinced and talked out of what we know will work for us. And so I'm happy to share time with Black by God and Crystal Good. And let me tell you, Danielle Walker is not giving up. She has had discussions about the need for communication, even down to making sure there are cards available for those who can't see and have the Braille on there, working with and calling for there to be a person doing sign language when we have the meeting, because it's not because they're there in the meeting, but we want them to see the clips and know that they are welcome to the meeting, and continuing to not be the icing on the cake, but go deeper and reach deeper, and making sure that the people are okay and that they understand and that they have a way to not simply survive, but definitely to thrive. And so that's something current that actually 2 days ago was launched, and very excited to be in this space to share.
I'd like to say that, you know, there's these rotating savings and credit associations that I've been obsessed with for a decade. So imagine like these academics, we sit around studying, but the reason why it's taken me like 10 years is because I have to go really underground to find these informal cooperative groups. These women call themselves the banker ladies. And they're basically informal cooperative institutions where peer-to-peer lending and saving groups, where women come together in community and they pool their, usually it's money, but they can do other things because each one is democratically organized. And I'm doing that among the African diaspora in Canada and the Caribbean, but my work is expanding with Sharon Austin at the University of Florida. And we're going to be looking at these ROSCA groups. So many of you who are on this call in the US will be hopefully coming to your hometown to speak to women who organize these ROSCA groups. And please, if you can, stay in touch, because these ROSCA groups are hidden from mainstream society. A lot of that is done on purpose because of the dangers that actually exist against these women who want to do self-help and mutual aid on their own terms and not buy into corporatization. There's a degree of danger that exists.
Carolyn, have you heard, as you talk about cooperative Seed Commons? I'm a part of Seed Commons. It's a group that has brought money together, some people with their inheritance, and they support cooperative businesses. And so they specifically work on making sure that it is a loan, but it's a loan that will never exceed. It'll always be less than anything else. It takes into consideration how people move. And so I'm a part of that peer group here in West Virginia, which is New Economy Works West Virginia. And we help evaluate and have those discussions with those who want to have a business, and helping them know that they don't have to go it on their own. That where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there is power in the midst. And Seed Commons is an organization understanding that that's the best way to go for ourselves, and more specifically women. We do work cooperatively together. We do have more of a sense, even if we're fighting with each other, want to see each other do well, their kids to do well. So Seed Commons is another space to bring resources into West Virginia and bring it to people in a way that they understand.
Well, I think it's wonderful, all of the chat information that there is, all these organizations and these strategies that women are using. If you're in a community that you know needs some well-being and some help, what do you think is the first step? You're just an everyday woman. You're just thinking, hey, these are some pretty good ideas. How do you get started? Well, how do women get started? What's the first step, do you think?
Well, I know that because I work and study with a lot of grassroots women, and one thing that we're trying to do is build alliances between scholars and practitioners and activists. So if you're thinking you have great ideas, find out who, start local, start in your own backyard, see who's doing what, and give them a call and reach out, because I think that that's the way that we start. If we can start collaborating and collectively coming together, that's where we thrive, right? And I think it's a lot of what Katonya and Crystal have been echoing here, is that how do you find these alliances, right? Who are these associations that already have a platform that can work with you to develop? And that's how the banker ladies, you know, so many of the banker ladies just find me at the university and they're like, listen, we are being oppressed. We need you to, you know, educate the public on what a ROSCA is so the police are not confiscating our goods, and educate them through, you know, a short film or something. I'm not a filmmaker, but they are figuring out how to latch on to those and figure out how to make these connections. And I would say that if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I need to stand up and do something, I've got to figure out how to do that. There are people in your community. They may be underground, they might be at the university or certain colleges. Reach out and then start creating that I don't know, what is it, that synergy with different people.
But you know what else? What you said right there is speak it. Let people know about it. Talk to, because you might not know, your neighbor might not know, but the more people you tell about it, they're gonna say, did you talk to sister so-and-so? She did something sound like that somewhere some time ago. I don't know what it was, but it sounds something like that. And you go over and you talk to sister so-and-so, and you don't let her go simply going, I will call you back. You keep control of that conversation. Oh, that's lovely, but can I still have your phone number? Oh, Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Oh, that's gonna be great. And let's not forget the great resource here, at least that I've been introducing people to, is our library. Our library and the people there to do your own research and lean not just on your own understanding. Don't let people simply tell you no and it doesn't make sense. Do you know how many times their own ignorance they will put forward as knowledge? Ask more than one person. If it sounds good and it ain't gonna hurt, maybe it's a space that you need to create. If you find truly it doesn't exist, but people will tell you no because it's not the norm and you shouldn't be able to do it. And someone that looks like you shouldn't even be talking about it. So open your mouth and speak and go to those places and do your research. Google is really helpful and the like.
I want to echo that. I mean, getting more comfortable speaking about money brings us back into our power. We're able to deepen and develop relationships. And it's been so taboo and not taught the basic financial education. I do have a money history questionnaire I share during workshops. I'd be happy to give anyone for free as well. I'll put my email in the chat, because I think the more we can look within and then also come from that place and get comfortable and more intimate with people through talking about money, we can connect. And it's amazing the wealth that can be revealed in our own communities through good group facilitation and processes that like bring out the best in people, let everyone have a voice. And even if someone in the circle, like in these offers and needs, doesn't know, you know, they often have a connection, this law of 7 degrees of separation. So I like this theme of asking questions, listening, and we're so relationship driven humans, but women in particular. And so, yeah, really share with others and get vulnerable. If you don't know, be willing to ask questions.
And find those feminists, you know, they're everywhere. Just link up with them. They're in so many spaces, you know, within the solidarity or social economy, you know, churches. A lot of the banker ladies are neighbors who started off, and then they started talking to each other. And then they approach me and they just say, hey, what are you doing at the University of Toronto that can help us do this, you know? And I was just like so happy to make that happen. There's so many activist scholars that are actually looking for ways to connect with people so that we can really make more impactful research.
So this is kind of a different question, but I wonder if there are public policies or possibly legislation that you think would help make mutual aid easier or more visible, or what kinds of recommendations might you have about those kinds of more public statements?
I don't know if people are familiar with David Bolyar's work. He's at I think it's the Center for a New Economics, the Schumacher Center in Massachusetts. He's doing some work, interesting work, and you might want to check out his work, like a commoner, which kind of is, you know, around that area of how do we share the commons, right? How do we mutually come together collectively to stop privatizing certain goods for society. But I think that you can move, like for me, when I think of mutual aid, because I'm working on a book on mutual aid and these kind of collective financial co-ops that are informal, for me, it's about looking to other countries that have actually created policies and legislations that help in a really pragmatic way these institutions to thrive. So I will name a few and I'll put them in the link. And thanks for Mary Beth for putting the link to Bollier's center, the Schumacher Center. There is a Ghana Susu system. In West Africa, Ghana, the government has created I think a menu of different types of economic institutions. So you have commercial banks, you have cooperatives, and you have credit unions, you have microfinance institutions, international nonprofits that do sort of lending. But you also have these Susu systems, both formal and informal. And they don't regulate the informal ones, which are the vast majority, but they have thought about sort of the protection of consumers who want their Susu system, which is, an informal collective money pooling system, who want some sort of protection. Another place I would send people is to Kerala, India, in South India, one of the best places to be female in this world. And Amartya Sen, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, really has spoken a lot about Kerala. Beena Agarwal, another really well-known and accomplished economist, has written quite a bit about the Kudumbashree, which is, I'll put that in the chat, but this kind of system where the women from the bottom up have really pressured their states to include policy making that reaches the most marginalized, caste excluded individuals, but really turn outside of our borders in the Western world and look to countries that are thinking about informality in exciting ways.
It makes me think of SIWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association.
Exactly.
Which they became a union, even though they were self-employed, and the state said, well, you can't do that. Unions are for workers and not business owners. And they challenged that and changed that and have done wonderful things. Yeah. Well, I think it's time for us. There's a lot going on in the chat. This is a very active chat. I'm glad to see it. I wonder, do we have any? No, we don't have any open questions in the question and answer section. So if you have particular questions, those of you in the audience, please put them forward now, and we'll talk about what you are wondering about. And Caroline and Katonya and Crystal, if you have questions you're asking yourself or you'd like to ask one another, now's the time to jump in and do that. What are you wondering about?
Well, there is a question in the chat from Delegate Danielle Walker, wanting each one of the panelists to name a call to action that each one, having a captive audience, very interested in putting out that call to everyone that's on here. So what's a call to action?
Good one. Thank you for keeping track of that. Well, Crystal, I think you're calling people to offers and needs workshops and maybe becoming a facilitator of the offers and needs workshop. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll speak to this just for a moment. It's really about redefining our wealth and our sense of value. And these are some of the exercise that we kind of walk people through in the beginning to look at what types of offers they may have. And it can include passion, knowledge, and perspective, skills and services, opportunities, and resources. So we're really expanding our sense of what's possible to even offer to people. And I've had people break down in tears, and it's really, yeah, quite something to be able to expand our definition of what we bring of value and what other people find of value. So that's really my call to action, is if people want to share their emails, join our training. I find group facilitation is one of the most important and undervalued skills in our modern world, as we look at how to organize our communities and really bring out the best in people. So, and even as a mother, I use the facilitation skills with my kids and family, and the use of silence to be able to reflect. So there's really a lot of skills that we teach, even if you aren't like yet a facilitator. It's just means making things easier for people. So encourage you not to be intimidated by this kind of training. It's very applicable to your personal and professional life.
So I'm trying, Rickey, I'm trying to have a call for action in Canada. That probably makes me the most complex professor right now in some spaces, is that I'm challenging even formal cooperative institutions who ignore and exclude when minorities or Black folks or racialized people, Indigenous folks, want to organize co-ops that are not quite formal. So I'm trying to really take issue with this play between informality and formality. And I think COVID in so many ways is helping me do my work about what's so great about being formal. Can we also appreciate what goes on in the informal? And, you know, in some spaces, informal is what makes sense. So the call for action for me is really for us to start really questioning this binary between formal versus informal, and for people to get in line and work with us to kind of push even within the progressive circle of solidarity economics to start seeing and appreciating and inventorying different kinds of experiences of self-help.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I love all of that, because you just don't know how important it is that in an organization that has adopted what I feel is more of a male-driven way of operating, as we're fighting against these things that oppress women, I'm noticing within the organization, we copy those things. And then when we bring new people in and we usher them in and they're just trying it out and dipping their foot, and we go, now we're gonna do Rob's Rules of Order. Well, what is that? You know, so why is there the meeting after the meeting? It's because people are trying to get an understanding and they're doing those negotiating. Some of the politicking is happening there and things are being done. We need to take a look at the informal, how to bring that in, how to have that discussion, how to create that space that everyone can exist in, that we have the ways of talking with individuals so that you know that they got an understanding and that they were heard, that what they have to say is of value as well. And so I'm definitely down with that, Carol. I'm down with making sure people have those concentric circles where they know what they're already doing is this just by another name. They're calling it something Latin, you know, and it just means XYZ, you know, and I don't know why people do that. It drives me crazy. Also, I have a call for people to stop just using acronyms. I have no freaking idea what most of these acronyms mean. I can't remember them. Some of them resemble each other. And I don't have a clue. I asked someone today, did they even know what the YWCA meant? I mean, what are those words? And so when you hear what those letters actually mean, it also helps you have a clearer picture of the work that they're doing. And so when you take the words away, you take the association away. But my call to action is something that we're working on. If you don't think it's a shameless plug, as I go on and happy to be able to occupy the space of Black by God here in Appalachian, West Virginia, you know, where they only stayed 100% in the Appalachian Mountains, is that we're creating for once something that we don't think, because we don't really know what's going on before and who tried things in little circles, but we're trying to get people to join in creating a Black policy A Black policy breakfast is what we're doing. February the 11th, we're coming together. We're not saying we're a monolith, but what we are saying is there are some common goals and that we need to talk to each other and have a bit of learning going on, and just bringing different Negroes to the table. And let's get the work done, let's get to talking, let's create what that common pillar is, what those policies and things that need to change, what we need to work on. And we're gonna be doing that. We're doing the work here in Charleston, West Virginia for the state of West Virginia, and actually pulled people in from people creating a Black Appalachian policy, political policies. Does this give us some direction and again, some language? And the other thing, who said it's not professional? Who said it's not professional to bring the children to work? Who said it's not professional to bring the children to the meetings? Who said it's not professional for the child to be crying and be looking down? That had to be some man somewhere. We need to make sure we are having family-friendly events that all women can attend, that as we have aspects, we have part of those discussions to include childcare and fully having women involved in the situation, no matter what their circumstances are.
Rickey, I'd love to respond to a question here in the Q&A, if that's all right. Mary was asking, is there a particular difference between offers and needs and time banks? Just wanted to clarify, the offers and needs market is a group process that's facilitated, and the time banks is an online service that you sign in with a kind of profile. So they're complementary, and we're seeing it really does complement, adding in that personal connection, you know, that often it can be a little impersonal to do these kinds of things. But, you know, you get in a room, even if it's a Zoom room, and you can watch someone's body language and determine how and who you vibe with and want to potentially exchange with or follow up with. So just wanted to respond to that. Thanks.
Wonderful. That is cool. Rickey, did we tell you that West Virginia
That was the question.
Did we tell you that West Virginia is going to attempt to give again to have a public bank?
No, that's exciting.
And I love that.
I remember.
Yeah.
Rickey, if you turn off your
public bank.
Turn off your video so we can hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, that's why I turned off the video before, because my
You're
audio.
okay now. Oh.
I guess I can't do both. I can't be visible and speak. But I wanted to say that an economy of our own, repeating its learning circle, which is a workshop series that will be happening. We're meeting about that at the end of the month, be announcing when we're going to be redoing that. So maybe West Virginia would like to be part of that effort. We're just trying to widen the circle of people's understanding about what it is. That's another thing that is more cooperative, but is a threat to Wall Street. And so we don't hear much about it in the media at all. But it's a way for our money to stay locally invested in, you know, the businesses on Main Street instead of the derivatives of a global economy. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful news. So are there any other questions?
So how did you put Banker Ladies together? You said that there is a fear, and those ladies are quite forward and quite clear about what they're meaning to do. And I don't know, I know I watched it a couple of times. It looks like some other people. How did you get them to come pretty much unveil, unmask, and speak the truth of the situation with that fear? And then how did you get the movie, you got it put together?
Yeah, okay, well, thanks for that question, Katonya. So the banker ladies, so I'm a researcher, I write books, that's what I do. I go to these women and I'm still working on the book, which will come out, I think, in 2 years' time with the University of Toronto Press. But usually what I try to do when I meet with people is go back and share sort of what I found and, you know, what do they think, just so that we're in communication, right? Like, what are some issues that happen? You develop a relationship as a feminist researcher with the people that you interview. So I like to always go back. It's usually big focus groups and what have you. And at one session, I remember this in the East End of Scarborough, a lower income community. A few of the women I had my research assistant photocopy a whole bunch of a recent publication based on sort of the findings. And the women scolded me. They said, "What are you doing? Why are you bringing us homework? You know, we're not interested in reading all these pages. We want to see something change." And what they were talking about is that when police raid their homes or they lose funds because someone has absconded with the group's money or something happens, there's no legal recourse. When they try to explain what they're doing, people liken it to a pyramid scheme, or they label them as mules, drug mules, or terrorists, money launderers. You heard in the film, one of the women called Aisha Somali, that's very common with women who veil, that they're seen as doing something illicit and illegal. And so what my work is trying to do is to bring policy forward. And a lot of that has been preempted by the women themselves, who really made me think about doing research in a more creative way. So I have zero creative skills. I'm not an artist in any way. But what I do know how to do is to write, and I know how to write grants, and I know how to hire people to do that work that are skillful. And so a Haitian Torontonian by the name of Esri Mondesir had just finished, he's a filmmaker, documentarian, but a teacher full-time, like that's how he pays his bills. He actually said, "I want to take on this project because the women in my life have always done soul." So Haitians have a very rich tradition of these money pooling systems. And so for about 2.5, 3 years, he basically followed the stories of these women. And you get, I mean, to do film, it's like writing a book. You spend months on end with hundreds of hours of footage that you eventually put it down to 25 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the reality. And he did that labor. And it's more of an education process. The women wanted to see a film that was open access, that could circulate, and that could change perception about mutual aid. And I really didn't want to release it before my book is out. But it was 2020. Black Lives Matter was happening in Toronto like it was happening in the US. And the director of the film was like, "We need to release this because, I mean, this is where we bring awareness right now, you know?" So if people could share that, speak about Roscas, get in touch with me if you know about these groups. These women are self-organizing themselves. They've always done that. Many immigrant groups are doing this when they're excluded from formal finance, right? It's a way to get life moving and a way to build experience and also to have fun. These women make food, they gossip about their menfolk, they think about strategy, about how to do things, right? Like, this is not just about money. A lot of other things come into that space, right? But be clear that they're thinking strategically about how to get a lump sum of money from the people that put their share into it. But I've written a lot on it. So if people want to know how the mechanics of how these things work, please visit my website. There's lots of like free information that's out there. But thanks for that question, Katonya.
And Crystal, how are the people who were impacted by that? I know you're doing the work to build back, but where are you with that project after the tragedies?
Right. Yeah, it's a long road, and we're seeing more and more climate disasters. And I feel like women really are at the heart of community organizing. There are a lot of great men who stepped up too, but I think it's an important thing to look at is how we turn towards each other. We've really made efforts. There's some nonprofits to make sure that it's not gentrified, right? We've seen like, oh, the whole town's burned, and now the people come in, make their money, build their nice things. So there's definitely been some effort from early on to kind of prevent that, although it is of course happening as well. So it is a long road, and I know we're going to see more and more actual climate disasters, and the need for not only immediate care, but not forgetting about those people and making sure their water is clean and they have the services they need. Especially many of the people in trailer parks were uninsured or underinsured. And so they really, took it hard. So it is inspiring, and it is a long haul marathon as well.
And I just want to say, with the disasters, I was contacted by a new branch of the FEMA agency that has now a civil rights component, that they were noticing high numbers of minorities and others being rejected by the way their form is laid out. And they acknowledged that it will take a while. It's a very, very long process. Unnecessarily, bureaucracy takes over. And so while they're working on reworking those applications and forms, they created this new branch, which is now the civil rights branch of FEMA.
That's exciting. Oh, we should have a we should have a commission to simplify everything. You know, the legislation is for everything is just so huge and so overwrought and full of language that and detail that just seems to get in the way of getting things done, because people can't take the time to understand it all. Of course, that's part of the purpose of that kind of language, is to exclude people, right? And is for an inside group, isn't it? So common everyday language should be a goal of whatever organizations we're working with to in creating for mutual self-help. Yeah. Well, any other questions? I know that there was someone in the group who had asked a question ahead of time, who had asked, I'm working on research related to community approaches to climate disasters in conflict settings. How can everyday women get started with solidarity economies in their own communities in that kind of a situation? I know you've talked about that a little bit, Crystal, but in a climate situation, there are, of course, all kinds of climate situations these days. It could be fires, it could be floods, it could be in winds, any number of things. But what have any of you seen connected to how women get started in those situations? The first steps.
Yeah, I'll say briefly, just it's really about building resilience, inner resilience, having a diversity of network of people that we can trust and draw on. So really not being so socially isolated, because you really want to know who your neighbors are when the flood cuts off the street or you have no power for 10 days. So I would say anything we can do and it's uncomfortable maybe at first too, right? To ask your neighbor for a favor, but there is this kind of reciprocity that's at the heart of community, and the capitalist system has really robbed us of that kind of natural weaving by being vulnerable and expressing our needs. So I would say just really focusing on the relationships of having plans in place, but really, yeah, there is just kind of a resilience, both emotionally and with having a diverse kind of network to draw on when disaster may strike unexpectedly.
I'm having trouble keeping track of my own script and the chat over here, which is so busy. But Ellen is helping me out here. Thank you, Ellen. I just want to say thank you again to our wonderful panel. I want to ask you, you know, we have this place where you can raise your hand. Will you raise your hand if you got some information tonight that you think might be useful to you? How many hands do we see raised? Can I see that? I don't see how many. Huh? Who sees that?
You can see it in the participants. There's 8 hands raised and two among the panelists and 8 attendees.
Oh.
Yeah, I would raise my hand. Oh, I have to hit the button though. I can't actually raise my hand. You see how old-fashioned I am. Right. And how many folks here would love to be able to extend this conversation and just keep on doing it? I would. We're not going to be able to do that tonight. We've got to say goodnight for now. But I do hope that you will take advantage of the recording that we'll be sending you, the resources for further learning that we'll be sending you, and you'll all get a copy of the chat as well. And yeah, we want to thank our audience for joining us. We are trying to lift up every woman's expertise in economics. We like that informal way of operating that includes not just numbers and abstractions, but actual caring and results. There are lots of ways to keep in touch with an economy of our own. We've got a newsletter that I hope you'll sign up for, because we have lots of people doing more and more things, and we've got a blog on Medium, and you can follow us on social media and share those if you would, and help us widen this circle. And then of course you can invest in amplifying women's voices with our giving circle. Join us for future Zooms. We're going to try to have 6 more this year. And I talked about learning circles and a workshop series. We're going to be doing another one on public banking and another subject yet to be determined. So if you have some ideas for what you want to learn about, be in touch with us about that. So with that, I guess I will have to say good night. I'm going to just say, there I am. I hope, can you hear me? I just want to say good night and thank you again so very, very much. Thanks to Ellen, our tech whiz, Carmen Rios, our Wonder Woman behind the scenes, and Mary Beth Gardam, who's been keeping us on time. Many, many thanks, everyone. Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you.